65 feet.
65.
Welcome to the inaugural Hooked on Movies podcast. I'm Zach Powell, and with me as always, depending on how this goes, is everyone's favorite co-host, Ben Lively.
It's a beautiful Friday evening here in Dallas, Texas. We're recording this from a high-rise apartment downtown to an audience of a magnitude that is soon to be determined. Hopefully, Spotify and Apple will find this podcast appealing enough to allow us to post it on their wonderful platforms. On an unrelated note, Spotify and Apple are our sponsors for the week.
So I just wanted to say, the thing is, I was kind of wondering if you wanted to.
Lost for words? Share a song.
Thanks, Spotify. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What's going on, and why should I waste my time listening to two 20-somethings talk about movies for 45 minutes?
So how this podcast is going to work is every week we're going to give you, I guess we're going to do our best to see as many new releases as possible. I'm talking Skyscraper with Dwayne Johnson. I'm talking Hotel Transylvania 3. I'm talking The Grinch. The Sony animation classic with Benedict Cumberbatch. That looks so good. I'm so excited to talk about it. So yeah, we're going to talk about the new releases of the week, and we're going to break that up into three sections. We're going to start with the blockbusters, because that's what most people care about. That's the Marvels, the Skyscrapers, the Star Warses. Then we're going to go into movies that, if you can tell by our history, that we're going to like a little bit more. That's the independent films. So those are the smaller ones you might not have heard of. If you're friends with us, you probably have heard us talk about them. We're going to talk about the indies next. And then finally, if there are new streaming releases, as there are sometimes on Netflix or HBO, there have been a couple this year that I've seen.
The Cloverfield Paradox?
The Cloverfield Paradox.
Oh, that was last year.
That was this year, after the Super Bowl.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's going to be a couple. I didn't see Set It Up, but apparently it's a nice rom-com on Netflix. We'll save that for after the indies.
The Kissing Booth.
The Kissing Booth. There have been some classics on Netflix this year. But regardless, we're going to put those at the end. And so that'll kind of be our 3-step reviews of new releases. And then we're going to end the podcast with a segment where we draw from the 1001 movies to see before you die list. On episodes where it's just me and Ben, we'll kind of decide between ourselves one we want to talk about. It'll be one that we've recently seen. You can find the list on the podcast part of the website or in the show notes if you want to see a list of all of them. And then sometimes we will have guests on the show, and they can review as many movies as they've seen with us as they want. Or if they just want to be a part of the 1001 movies segment, that's their prerogative. But basically, they'll bring on a movie that they've seen and loved, they've seen and hated, or they've never seen and want to get a chance to see and talk to us about it from that list of 1001 movies to see before you die. And we'll talk about that, and that's how we'll end out the podcast. And then if something crazy goes on in Hollywood, we'll talk about that. Like when MoviePass shuts down in a couple weeks, we'll probably discuss.
A couple weeks?
An in memoriam for MoviePass.
Oh, that'll be a whole episode.
Yeah, just the 60
we're
minutes.
We're not talking about movies that episode.
All about why we loved MoviePass.
Yeah. What's that CEO's name?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Adam Jones.
Daddy. All right.
Daddy movies.
So the first review that we're going to talk about is this small indie movie called Ant-Man.
And the Wasp.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's from a small series of films called the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think this is the 17th. Maybe 18th?
Yeah, 18th.
They've been doing 3 a year for a while now. So I guess I'll just dive right into this one. I'm going to be plagiarizing myself a little bit from our hookedonmovies.org /Zach's-reviews. I did not enjoy the promotional material for this movie. I saw the trailer 5,000 times. I've been watching a lot of movies this summer, have a lot of time on my hands, and I've seen this trailer more than anyone should ever see an Ant-Man trailer. But I walked into that theater with as open a mind as I could, wanting to enjoy it, wanting it to be good. Marvel's on a hot streak. And I think that hot streak is exactly what ruined the movie for me. For better or for worse, Marvel over the past 2 years has kind of perfected their movie format. Last year they had a great track record with Guardians 2 and Spider-Man Homecoming, which I really enjoyed. They're in the top 10 MCU movies for me. Thor Ragnarok was a great showcase for Taika Waititi, even if I wasn't the biggest fan of it. And then this year they obviously had Black Panther and Infinity War, which I really enjoyed both of those. And so on those last two specifically, they kind of had major stakes, whether it be just in Wakanda or for the world at large. And I really enjoyed those stakes. You had Killmonger, Michael B. Jordan, you had Thanos, Josh Brolin, and they both, you knew they meant business. And now with Ant-Man, you have, for some reason, you've jumped back 2 months from the cliffhanger, I don't feel so good ending of Infinity War. And you've jumped back to a time where it's just some fun adventures with Paul Rudd and his daughter. Funny Michael Pena stops by. And I think that momentum halt is what kind of stopped the movie for me. Is I was ready for Infinity War 2. I was even ready for Captain Marvel, bring her into the mix. But when you this is kind of a 2 or 3 steps back for me. This is kind of pre Guardians 2 Marvel for me. And I wasn't ready for that step back, and it really disappointed me. The villain in particular, and I'll let you talk and then go into more specifics about why I didn't like it. But for me, really, it all kind of stemmed around the script and the villain. And I think that's kind of similar to some of the qualms you have with it.
Yeah, well, I'll preface this by saying mediocre movies are my least favorite movies. For some people, it's like every movie is like a 10 until something happens that they don't like, and then it goes down to a 9, 8, down from there. For me, movies start at 0, and they have to do something exceptional to get a higher review. And this movie is probably one of the blandest that I've seen this year. When I want to go to the theater, I want to see a movie that's like really good or so bad that it's funny. And this one was just neither. It was right in the middle. And a lot of that is just because of the script. It was so bland. It was like listening to the first draft of whoever wrote it. Every line of dialogue sounded like it was submitted to a corporate focus group that just had to approve it before they could put it out on film to make it as safe and unrisky as possible.
Especially the humor.
Especially the humor. None of it made me laugh. And it's not because I have some vendetta against Marvel films. Like, there are some moments in other MCU movies that are genuinely funny, like in Infinity War. I laughed. But this movie had none of that. And a lot of it is because I think Marvel has gotten in this habit of thinking that once they've developed the characters in their own first movies, they don't need to do any more character development. Like, oh yes, these are your favorite superheroes, and they're gonna stay like they are forever. But in this movie, Ant-Man, the old man, Evangeline Lilly, none of them have any significant arcs. There's no change in their characters. They're just kind of being their branded selves, you know?
Yeah.
And, so because of that, there was no real character interest for me, and I wasn't going to laugh at the jokes of the jokes I've heard 1,000 times from these characters that I've seen 1,000 times before.
Yeah.
I think credit where credit is due. Some of the action scenes were good. I like their whole shtick of making things smaller and bigger, even though that just seems to be what drove the script, is what can we make small and what can we make big. But a lot of the fake science bothered me. It was very annoying when they'd put quantum in front of every word. And in places even where it didn't seem like it would fit, and the whole fake quantum science seemed to be like just a magical solution for everything, like how in Black Panther the vibranium was the magical solution for everything. That was my least favorite part of that movie. So yeah, I did not enjoy this movie just because it was so mediocre. And I think other people will find it fine. And maybe, I think it's so riddled with cliches that I've seen so many times that when I see these cliches, I just roll my eyes and I hate it. But for people who don't go to movies that often or aren't as familiar with these kind of cliches, I think they'll enjoy it.
Yeah. I had two things about points that you made. One of which is the character arcs.
Yeah.
And you said you said something along the lines of how they're kind of stagnant. So they're all playing the same characters that we've seen a bunch. We saw it in Civil War. We saw it in Infinity War. I guess not with Ant-Man because he wasn't in that, but in Civil War and Ant-Man, they're kind of stagnant. What bothered me the most was actually the fact that Ant-Man wasn't stagnant. He wasn't the character that we saw in Civil War, and he wasn't the character that we saw in the original Ant-Man. If you remember back to 3 or 4 years ago, whenever that came out, he was marketed as in the movie, he was like this great criminal. Like him and Michael Pena and the Russian guy and the other dude, they pulled off a heist against a genius scientist, Michael Douglas. So they're really good at their jobs. And here, those 4 characters are reduced to just comic relief. And I get that that's kind of meant to bring out the best in the Wasp. And I'll get to her in a second. She's fantastic. But I think she's fantastic at the expense of the other characters. And they've redacted those characters just to punchlines. And I wish this movie was just about Evangeline Lilly and Michael Douglas because it would have been a lot better. I didn't need the dumb jokes between those 4 characters. And I didn't need what used to be these kind of strong con men that were actually really smart and pulled off great heists turned into dumb security workers. Also, what was the other thing you said? I forgot. Oh yeah, the giant and the small things. That was really cool. And in the trailer that I saw 5,000 times, the Hello Kitty thing and the salt thing, both are in the trailer, were both really unique. And I was like, okay, this could lead to some fun action sequences. I'm excited for this part. Those were pretty much it in terms of big and small. I was looking for I would be using that power all the time, making things big and small. That would be like the coolest thing.
Big and small?
Clever. But no, I would be doing stuff like that throughout because that's really cool, and that's cool graphics and cool visuals and can lead to action sequences that we can't see in other Marvel movies, and it would make this movie unique. But unfortunately, they used it so little, and maybe it's because of effort, maybe it's because of budgeting, that really it kind of lost its impact because it really did nothing to surpass. If you remember the train sequence from the first movie, that was when the big Thomas the Tank Engine thing. It's been out for 4 years, so no spoilers. That sort of thing was in the first movie, and I was expecting them to bring that to another level in this movie, and the trailers kind of hinted at that, and then they really did nothing with it. So that was something I was excited for, but then kind of got let down with. I do not hate this movie as much as you do. I just thought it was kind of a wash, probably middle to low end of the MCU. Two of the things that I really liked about it, I loved Evangeline Lilly's The Wasp character. I'm excited to see more of her in the future Avengers movies and all that. I thought her action scenes were the best, way better than Ant-Man's. Ant-Man's I was kind of just eyes glazing over, kind of boring. But Evangeline Lilly's stuff where she kind of flew in and then got big and then flew out, and all that stuff was really well done and cool. And then also the mid-credits scene, which we can't really talk about because of spoilers, was probably my favorite credit scene that the MCU has done. It made me laugh. It was my favorite part of the movie. It probably rose my whole score, probably half a star if I'm being honest, just because it left a good taste in my mouth. Impression, yeah. But if you're a huge MCU fan, if you want just kind of something to turn your brain off to, if you love the first one, you should probably go spend your money on this. But unless you're seeing it free with Movie Pass, I wouldn't spend the $10 it's going to cost. There's better stuff to see in the theaters right now. And that leads us to our next kind of bigger blockbuster movie, which is actually The First Purge, which is the 4th movie in the Purge franchise. I can say stuff about it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was disappointed with The First Purge. And here's why.
Disappointed.
I had expectations.
Okay.
Because this was the First Purge, and you could have done something. Everyone always says whenever these come out, like, this is a great concept, but these are crappy movies. And for some reason, every time I go to one of these, and I've seen the third and the fourth one, I didn't see the Ethan Hawke one, I go in saying, this would be a cool concept. It'd be a fun video game. It'd be maybe a cool TV series premiering on USA. Yeah. But every time they do the same thing, where we're going to stay in a confined location. For some reason, people say they are going to leave and then they don't, or they're going to stay in their house and then they don't. And oh no, they're out in the open during the purge. And you always get to that point. There's always a couple villain characters and it's always the same old thing, but you could do really cool things with this. Like what would a creative person do during the purge? Like you could go and rob a bank, or you could booby trap your house and kill the robbers. Like if someone comes up to your house, why don't you just get a shotgun and you can do the killing? Like there's different ways. I'm not endorsing murder, but there's different ways.
Murder is our sponsor.
there's unique perspectives you can have on this besides just crazy people go and kill against sane people that are there for no reason. Mm-hmm. And you could do a bunch of different things, like go trespass somewhere cool. Like what would that look like? Oh, it's in New York. Go trespass in Madison Square Garden. Throw a rager at Madison Square Garden. That'd be a Project X, but it's the purge. Like there's cool things you can do with the concept of everything's legal, and there's cool like psychological questions you can ask. But instead, they're just choosing to say every single time, strong political message, empowerment, the government's against us, and this whole thing that other movies do way better. And instead, this movie is just saying the same thing that the other four have done under the guise of, we'll get buzz if we say it's the first one. And we do that Make America Great Again hat.
Well, if you look at it from a financial perspective, the model of these purge movies seems to be just low budget,
$13 million,
high return. Yes, and that worked for the first one because worked. I say worked. It wasn't, but they were stuck in that house and like it made sense. But like even as they've gone on, and the plots. Like the plot for this one, it should have been a bigger scope, mm-hmm. or it could have had more potential if it were on a bigger scope, but the budget limits it. And you can see that in the movie because like a lot of the movie is spent like inside a hallway of an apartment. Yeah. And they try to make it interesting, but it's really like how interesting can inside of an apartment be mm-hmm. on a night where everything's legal? And yeah, they always default to murder because, I mean, that's just...
Fake blood is cheap.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. The effects in this movie were just abysmal.
And you mentioned the production kind of strategy. It's Blumhouse.
Yeah, Blumhouse.
And Blumhouse has been on the rise, and people are kind of claiming, oh, Blumhouse is the next great thing. But their whole strategy is make a ton of crap for low, and then if you hit one, you hit it big. And so you had Get Out, and that's Blumhouse's big thing. And you have The Visit, which is popular. And I'm wondering how many more...
Paranormal
Activity, sure. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering how many more bad Blumhouse movies can you get in a row before the name loses its value? Because you have Get Out. And so you have, Blumhouse from the producers of Get Out. But then if you make Happy Death Day and Truth or Dare and The First Purge back to back to back, how many of those do you have to make in a row for people to wake up and be like, oh... the producers of Get Out also produced 20 bad things in between now and Get Out. I just don't know how that's necessarily sustainable. Maybe people just don't care. Maybe people don't realize what Blumhouse is.
I think most people, or the average moviegoer at least, either doesn't know or care what Blumhouse is, or just doesn't see enough movies to
piece that together.
Yeah, piece it together. Because like if you see The Purge and you're like whether you like it or not, like you're not going to make that connection if you're only seeing 2 other movies that year.
Yeah.
You know?
So they're just going to continue to make low budget, bad horror movies.
And when they hit it big.
And that'll fund them for the next 10 years.
Yeah,
Get Out's got them good through 2020.
Right. I mean, this, The Purge, I mean, they've all made returns.
Well, Truth or Dare made like 3 times its budget.
Oh my goodness.
Classic Truth or Dare.
We won't get into Truth or Dare.
Best of the year.
Oh.
All right. So that is our blockbuster section. So after blockbusters, we're normally going to go ahead and talk about...
That's not a blockbuster.
I mean, bigger movies, non-indies. It's under the blockbuster title.
Okay.
Or big movies.
Blumhouse should be its own category.
Okay. We're going to have blockbuster and then Blumhouse and then independent movies.
Okay.
And so we have 2 independent movies. One is a documentary and one is a crazy movie that we saw at South by Southwest. And we're going to start with the documentary. So, 3 Identical Strangers.
Yeah.
You might have seen the trailer for it if you were watching live television or have been to a movie. It's about 3 brothers that go 19 years of their life without knowing that they had 2 other brothers. And suddenly they all go and they see each other at a college pretty much is the gist of it. And they all meet up, they get famous, and then things kind of go weird. And so what did you think of 3 Identical Strangers?
I liked it. Yeah. It's not the best documentary I've seen this year. That probably goes to
Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Won't You Be My Neighbor? Yeah, the Mr. Rogers one. But that's a personal thing, and I think a lot of people would like this one more.
Mm-hmm.
It goes in directions that I was not expecting when I heard like the plot of this movie. And are we spoiling? Like
No spoilers.
Okay.
You can go into vague details.
Vague details.
Because no one who's listening to this, all 5 of them, have not seen this movie.
That's true. Okay. Well, I can say that it does a really good job of raising questions. And I think it does a good job of making the viewer think without being too out there. And for me, it was a little too self-important, the documentary. And there were a lot of parts that seemed a little redundant or could have been edited better. But for the most part, like, it kept me engaged and invested in the lives of the three guys, and you feel a little bit attached to them.
Yeah, I think I walked out of the theater probably hating it the most out of everyone there.
Yeah.
And it's for
Would
2
you
reasons.
use the word hate it? Or...
Not hate. I disliked it more than anyone else in the theater.
Yeah, okay.
Because it definitely has its merits. I would give it a positive score, but nothing crazy. And it's probably 3rd out of the 3 documentaries I've seen this year. And I didn't like it for 2 reasons. The first you kind of touched on was its own self-importance. And the second was the way it delivered its message. So the self-importance piece, the buildup of the kind of introduction, and this isn't spoilers, it's in the first like 15 minutes, is they're basically set up where it's doing a bunch of different interviews with a bunch of different people. It's been done before. It's the way most documentaries are. And everyone keeps repeating the same sort of phrase where they're like, this story is unbelievable. This is the most incredible story I've ever written about in my life. Or this is the craziest thing you'll ever hear about for the rest of forever. And everyone says this. It's literally repeated like 4 or 5 times. Everyone who got interviewed said at some point, literally, this story is absolutely incredible. And so I sat there for the hour and a half waiting for it to become an incredible story. And I never think it gets there. And I never think it becomes, I think it's a crazy coincidence, not a crazy story. It gets to maybe weird story, but I could, not unbelievable, not incredible, not life-changing by any means. And the way it's kind of shot and the way the interviewers talk about it, they make it seem like life-changing, jaw-dropping. This will change the way you think about things. And to me, it was just a documentary. Could have been made, could have not been made, won't make any impact. And it just is not as important as they think it is.
Make any impact?
No.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't think that, well, I can't spoil it.
Technically, it made some impact in a tiny degree. But impact that matters to the world populace,
Okay.
it will not make.
But, okay.
Or its message will not make. Some documentaries, there was one that I didn't see that was about Natalie Portman, that not about Natalie Portman, that was made by Natalie Portman, that was about, it's called like Eating Animals or something, and it's about why you should turn vegan. That one's message technically could change the world if it made it its impact that it wanted.
Right.
everyone goes vegan. Or Natalie Portman said in an interview, I just want everyone to go vegan for one day and it would change the world. Okay, technically, yes. If this movie's message came true, I don't think 99% of people would even realize a change. What was the other thing that I disliked about this movie? Its self-importance. Oh, and the way it delivered its message. Do you want to go into anything about this before I completely...
It was a little obvious the kind of narrative that they were trying to push. Mm-hmm. And it was... I have some experience myself, like stitching together like documentary sort of things and editing for a narrative. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of obvious the way that they were pushing it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be obvious for...
I mean, I don't make documentaries.
I guess so. But that was a little distracting to me because it made me kind of doubt the validity of what they were saying.
Exactly.
Not of like the story, but like how it affected the people involved, and or if they were just being like dramatic for the camera or something. I don't know.
Without going into spoilers, the beginning of the movie is what we said. It's three brothers that meet up randomly after, or three identical twins that meet up 19 years later. They're all 19. They're all about to go into college. And that's when they first realize that they each have two identical twin brothers. That part, the beginning, the first 25, 30 minutes, most people, everybody's going to sit there saying, wow, that's crazy. That's like out of a movie. Can't believe that happened, but it's real. I'm staring at three people that look exactly the same. That part was in the trailer. That part I have no problem with. They start to kind of show a darker side as to why those events happened. And the way they kind of push those darker sides rubbed me the wrong way, to the point where it got to the most emotional part of the movie and I was rolling my eyes. And it might sound like I hate this movie, and I really don't. It's beloved by everybody, but for some reason it rubbed me the wrong way. It kind of had the vibe where it got one or two people outside of the situation to kind of validate what the people inside the situation were saying. So you have the three brothers and all the family members all doing these interviews, and they're kind of hinting at this darker past. And it seemed to me like instead of using kind of real evidence or a ton of outside sources, news footage, articles, laws, even like other documentaries have in the past, written proof, you have a random guy from Austin, Texas, and a Swedish girl who lives in, I think, New York or something. And you have these two random people, and that's the only evidence you kind of backed up to support your case. And it didn't convince me at all. And I might have been 3 steps ahead of everybody, or maybe I was just on pace where I kind of saw, I'm really cool at watching movies, where I kind of saw where it was going pretty early. And I was saying, I hope it doesn't go there. And if it does, I hope they change, or they change the way they're going, or they do something different. Because I kind of saw the trajectory it was going. And I said, if it's doing this, I'm not really going to buy it. And maybe not everyone else is here too. But then again, everyone kind of bought it. And it's kind of hard to go into this without seeing spoilers. So once you see it, you can maybe I guess you can't talk to us about it, but maybe you can.
Sure, you can. We're small enough right now. We can give you a personal.
Yeah, we'll give you our phone number. Just text us. Say, I agree with Zach, or I agree with everybody else. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. What I'm saying? Did you see that, or am I just being overly critical, and am I hating something popular to be cool?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
I'm not trying to make you hate the movie more.
No. I know what you mean, and that doesn't subtract from my experience with the movie.
I think when it comes down to it, I just don't think they proved their case very well.
Yeah.
And maybe it was the kind of cliched like swelling of music at the dramatic scenes that kind of threw me off. Maybe it was the people they interviewed that I didn't really buy as experts in any sort of way. But I'll throw out what I kept comparing this to is because the last time I was sold on a documentary that was unbelievable story you'll never believe will impact you crazily is Dear Zachary. Oh. Which is the best documentary I've ever seen. It's on Amazon Prime. Same. The two of you still listening, go see Dear Zachary, a letter to his son about his father.
Don't look up anything.
Don't look up anything. But what that documentary does is it uses facts to back up what it's claiming. It's telling you the facts of the situation, and then it's up to you to kind of feel and connect with characters. And what this did is the first 20 minutes, it told you facts. And then it kind of used the last hour and 10 minutes to kind of beg you to connect with these characters.
Yeah.
Please feel for these people. They're victims. Whereas in Dear Zachary, which there are some parallels to these two, and that they're crazy stories and it's a documentary about them. That one is just presenting you with facts, and you automatically as a human being feel for it. And maybe if this documentary had done the same thing, I would have felt for the triplets and I would have connected with their message. I might have, but I wasn't able to because of the way they presented it, because it was so kind of forced in my face.
Yeah.
It was like they were trying at the same time trying to convince me that they were important and begging me to side with them.
Yeah.
And in a documentary, just tell me the facts and I'll more than likely make the right choice and do what you want me to do. But I don't need to be spoon-fed stuff.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. It would have improved it, I think, if they had been more objective about showing the other side. Yeah, that shot of the guy laughing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. Yeah, I agree.
And again, I know I've done a great job of bashing this movie, but it's 95% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh yeah, it's
actually it's 95% on the other critic website. That's a direct competitor to Hotel Movies. It's our consensus on our website is 2 positives and a neutral.
Yes.
So it's probably still go see it. It's at the Angelica if you live in Dallas. If you live somewhere else, it's in limited right now. But it's a normal documentary. If you're going to see a movie this week or next week, see the one we're about to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Which we saw at South by Southwest. It's from a first-time director, Boots Riley, who's a rapper. Stars the guy from Get Out who says Get Out, the girl from Thor Ragnarok, Tessa Thompson, and Armie Hammer in my favorite role he's done by far.
What did that person call this? Spike Lee mixed with...
Yeah, so Edgar Wright tweeted out he just saw this movie, and I wish he'd seen it with us at South by, so he could have tweeted this out earlier. Yeah, I'd love to be buddies with him.
Us, yeah.
He said it was a mix of Spike Jonze, who directed Her and Adaptation, if you didn't know, and Spike Lee, who did Do the Right Thing. So if you know those references, it's a perfect encapsulation of what this movie is. And if you don't know what that means, basically this is set in kind of a sort of futuristic Oakland. It follows this kind of down on his luck African-American guy who needs to find work so he can pay his rent. And so he goes to a telemarketing firm. And at first he's terrible at his job until another wise old man tells him, use your white voice. And from then on, he uses his white voice in a fun way. And he starts rising through the company and things get crazy. Don't look up anything about this movie because it'll go in directions that you have no idea are coming.
The word that comes to me when I think about this script in this movie is just unhinged. Like there's no rules here.
Yeah.
It's like complete creative freedom, and he just pulls things out of nowhere that you're like, where did that come from? And yet it serves the story very well. And the commentary may seem to some people as being a little heavy-handed or obvious, but I don't know, it works somehow. It fits with like the whole vibe and theme of the movie, and it's so enjoyable to watch. Yeah.
I guess I came out of South by having this in one of the favorite movies that I saw that week, and we saw a ton of great movies, and this is probably the one that the second I got out of it, I wanted to see again the most. I was the second it comes out back into theaters, which I guess is this weekend for some people and next weekend for us and most of the country. I wanted to get back in and soak it all up again and kind of knowing where it's going, see kind of how the movie works. A lot of the criticisms that people have with this movie is the same reason why you kind of enjoyed it. They're saying it's unhinged. They attribute it to the fact that it's Boots Riley's first time directing. And so their kind of critique is he went in with the mindset of, I'm not sure if I'm going to get another opportunity, so I'm just going to say every idea I have and kind of throw it all up on a canvas. I love that canvas. You love that canvas. It's not for everyone. It is a lot. We're not going to be able to talk about this as much because I want you to go in as blind as possible. Definitely see it. People kind of compare it to Get Out, and that it's a social commentary from a first-time director. I've seen a lot of people compare it, especially when it premiered at South by. A lot of people were talking about it to those two. Get Out is a lot more poised, and it seems a lot more focused.
Yeah, and subtle.
But I came out more impacted by this movie. And maybe it's just because I just was along for the ride, and you just kind of have to let go of preconceived notions you have about what's okay to see on screen and like what a good narrative looks like. If you just go in saying, I'm ready to view art, because it is art, that Boots Riley's put on film, it's hard to walk away not impacted and not at least smiling a couple times.
Yeah. I think this movie, it can be deep if you want to think about it. But if you don't want to think about it and you just want to have a good time at the theaters, there's plenty of like really genuine laughs and fun moments, and just it's a good time to watch it. But I wouldn't say that it impacted me as much as Get Out did. That one scene in Get Out at the end when the cop shows up and he doesn't, like, you as the audience are saying, oh no, when the cop shows up, and that's supposed to be a good thing. Like that was so impactful for me, and there's no moments like that in this movie for me. Well, there's one really good. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But this movie, I think, is accessible to in an inaccessible way. I don't know how to say that.
I think it's, if you go into it with an open mind, it'll do its job for you. And I think in an argument for it, I mean, both Get Out and Sorry to Bother You are great movies. I think the reason it impacted me more is because I had no idea what was coming. And I'm trying to stay away from more trailers and try and not go into movies with expectations. But with this movie, I knew nothing about it. Get Out, I knew some things. I'd seen the trailers. This, I knew nothing about. And maybe going to South by kind of helps that. But I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I was a lot more engaged than I was in Get Out. And the ending, I had a smile and ear to ear the whole time for the last 30 minutes, which is hard for a movie to do. Normally they kind of slow down, but this just ramps up and up and up. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about Sorry to Bother You? Yeah, go see Sorry to Bother You next weekend. You will not be disappointed. See it instead of Ant-Man. Kill the Marvel machine.
Absolutely. They won't stop until we stop watching it. Oh, but I have to watch him so I can give negative reviews to him. The conundrum. What's next?
Sponsor break. So the final part of our podcast, our inaugural Hooked on Movies podcast, is going to be the first segment of the 1001 movies to see before you die list part. I don't really know what we're going to call this. But basically, every week we're going to talk about one of the 1001 movies. Normally, if we have a guest, they'll choose what we talk about. But since we don't have a guest, we got to choose. And it just so happened that we both recently watched within the past week or so, number 444, which is a French musical from the 1960s called The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. So this is a classic French musical directed by Jacques Demy.
Jacques.
Also call him Jacques, because that's how it's spelled.
It's Jacques Demy.
This is directed by Jacques Demy, the director of Young Girls of Rochefort, which is kind of his more famous movie. I first learned about it when it was brought up in connection with La La Land 2 years ago, which I absolutely loved. And so when I was told this was a big influence on it, I kind of sought it out and immediately fell in love with it. It follows two characters, Guy and Genevieve. Guy's the actual man's name.
Guy.
Okay, it's Guy.
I'll be here to pronounce everything
French
correctly.
Okay, so you got Guy and Genevieve. And so they're Genevieve. Thank you. My French is bad. And they're in a young relationship. He works at a garage, kind of fixing up cars. She works at an umbrella shop called the Umbrellas of Cherbourg. And so they kind of have a blossoming young romance. Her mother doesn't really agree with her decisions and kind of gets mad at her. And they end up meeting this kind of fancy rich man, and they kind of form this weird love triangle, and I guess events kind of rock their lives a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's
Shenanigans go down.
Shenanigans ensue. And over the course of 3 acts, you kind of see how their love life is rocked by, I guess, real life. And so the entire hour and a half is entirely in song. It's entirely in French, and it's from 1968. And yet it's one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. I could listen to the score and the soundtrack on repeat forever, and it's in French. And I still connect to almost every character. And I guess that's a compliment to the director, the actors involved, the musicians who put this together. It doesn't look like it's from 1968.
No.
It looks better than musicals today.
Yeah. And some of that has to do with we saw it on Criterion, and they did like a remaster and fixed it up. I actually saw the behind the scenes of that. It's incredible. The kind of stuff they did. But yeah, I did not expect this to be such a beautiful movie in terms of cinematography, color palettes. Like if you think Wes Anderson is good
with color,
like watch this movie. Honestly,
Jacques Demy on another level.
Oh yes, the costume design, the production design, it's all just immaculate. The whole thing, the whole time, and on a technical level, it's so impressive because there's no way they recorded the audio live.
No, it was pre-recorded.
But you cannot tell.
No.
The voices match up so perfectly with the actors acting live on screen that it looks like they're just singing it right there, and that is so hard to do, especially then. Yeah. And like with so many old movies, you'll see ADR that's done so badly. ADR is a dialogue replacement. But in this movie, they did it so well. And the cinematography, there's so many long shots of people in rooms, and you're like, wow, they did that in one shot. And, yeah.
Yeah, this was my second time watching it. And so I was actually watching for the dialogue to match, and I couldn't find a slip up, and I was looking for it this time. The first time I was just kind of enjoying the movie. The second time I was like, how good is this really? And I couldn't find a slip up. Ben was describing all the different things that's amazing about it, the set design, the costumes, the characters, and all of those things are really connected. Color, it's not just that, oh, it looks pretty. The colors have meaning, and they connect to characters, and they connect to plot points, and they connect to tone in a way that movies today just don't do. I mean, it's like Wes Anderson on steroids, and it's with more purpose. A lot of people say Wes Anderson's just style with his colors and stuff. This is, you can't say that about Jacques Demy, and you can't say this about Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Every shot, every set piece that they built they painted every wall with purpose, and they knew. I mean, he probably had to have a huge team because they knew exactly what they wanted to do. It was executed perfectly. I guess we had a little bit of discussion with the people we watched with about the ending, and without going into spoilers, did the ending emotionally impact you in any way?
I think it did, and not like in a traditional way though. In other movies, like this same movie from a different director with a different creative vision, maybe a studio, they would give you like definite emotional closure for an ending, and whether that be like a shot of some person crying or like saying a line of dialogue like, oh, blah blah blah, I love you, or something like that, or the forcing two characters together,
the music swells,
lights and stuff dim. Like that. That's not here. It's like the ending affected me with this emotional confusion that in the world of the characters, the guy must have been feeling, and I think this movie did such a good job of putting me in the headspace of each individual character. And that's what I admired so much.
We both watched it with our girlfriends, so I know 4 different people that have watched it. Yeah, we have girlfriends. So I know 4 different people who have seen it in the past week.
Hi, Emily.
And I've talked to all of them about the ending of this movie. And we all reacted to it differently. Some were more different than others. I was on kind of one huge end of the spectrum. You were kind of in the middle. Emily was kind of on the other end of the spectrum. But just the fact that this is a musical that you can have an ending that's as ambiguous as that. I think a lot of movies tell you how you should feel at the end. There's a clear-cut winner, loser, good guy, bad guy. Especially in musicals, almost every musical has that type of ending where it's the good guys win more than likely, or if they don't win, you're told how to feel. And that's just a cliche of musicals. It's a thing that musicals do because they're supposed to be happy. And this musical, it doesn't tell you what to think. It doesn't tell you how to feel, and it doesn't tell you who to root for. And you can come out of this movie saying, or not even saying, just really happy with the conclusion and saying that worked out well. You can come out saying that's devastating, and you can come out somewhere in the middle not knowing what to think. And I think that's why I am going to keep coming back to this movie, and why I keep thinking about this movie. It's because it gives you stuff to think about. And I also watched Singing in the Rain, which is known as the best musical of all time by many, right before this. And I much prefer Umbrellas because as good as Singing in the Rain is on a number of things. The dancing's amazing. The singing's amazing. The story's really cool. That kind of spoon-fed me a lot. And it was cool to marvel over the dancing, but when it comes down to kind of emotion, the emotional reaction I had, it was really by the book. Whereas Umbrellas is something that I haven't really felt by most movies today or in the past, or especially like foreign films. The fact that this movie's in French shouldn't even be brought up because it doesn't hinder your appreciation for the movie, even if you don't know a word of French. And maybe that's helped by the fact that it's all in music, and kind of music can connect you just through the feeling of how they sing the lyrics. I don't know, but sometimes people are kind of scared away by the fact that a movie's in a foreign language. I don't want to read subtitles. How am I going to be able to connect to that? If you've never seen a foreign film before, this is a great one to start at because that will be no issue whatsoever.
Oh no. Yeah. I think when I was watching this movie, I stopped like seeing it as a movie and just like kind of fell into the trance that it gives you. It's all sung, and you just kind of get caught up in the melody, and it's almost as if you forget that they're singing. You're just kind of listening and watching, and it's this beautiful combination of sound and image that's just entrancing, I think. Yeah.
Both times I've seen this, I've honestly forgotten it's in French. Yeah. I forgot that I'm reading subtitles. My eyes are looking at a screen and I'm just taking it in. Yeah. Which is weird. And we probably sound weird saying that.
It does sound weird.
But once you experience it, you'll kind of, I guess, see what we mean if you take it the way we do.
Yeah. It did not feel like, what is it, an hour and a half? Yeah. Yeah, it did not feel like that.
It was super short.
So super short.
And I could go back to that world. I will... Not asking for a sequel, but I could have taken 3 or 4 hours of just listening to them sing and sing their lives. Yeah.
And it's weird because like it's not like traditional music where there's a lot of repeated melodies and stuff like that. There's one central melody that you hear a few times.
Kind of one theme.
Yeah. But for the most part, it's like they're just doing arpeggios and going off on their own like little tangents musically. And so but that did not detract from my appreciation of it.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty clear we both absolutely recommend this film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely a good one to start on from this list of movies we should see before we die. We agree. You should definitely see this.
See it before you die.
Yeah, probably see it sooner rather than later. Like, don't wait till you're about to die. See it this week. See it next week. See it. You have time in the summer. While you're young. And you haven't made mistakes before you go to prison. All right. So that is our 1001 movies segment. And that pretty much wraps up our podcast. Teasing a little bit about next week or the week after that, depending on when we film this again. When we record this. I'm such an idiot. Next week, Skyscraper's coming out. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but he doesn't have a leg. What's going to happen?
Oh my gosh.
Hotel Transylvania 3. Adam Sandler's a vampire. What? On a boat? Oh. I'm ready. On a hopefully better note, 8th Grade, Bo Burnham's directorial debut. which we got to see at South by as well, along with Sorry to Bother You. No spoilers, but we both really enjoyed it. We're probably going to see it again before we review it. I'm going to try to at least. So if you want to know if that's worth your time. And then on streaming, the only thing that's coming out is The Legacy of a White-Tailed Deer Hunter with Josh Brolin and Danny McBride.
We had the opportunity to see that.
So if I can't fall asleep and Netflix is on, I might click on that.
Yeah, sure.
I guess we'll get there when we get there. We don't know if we're going to have a guest. So we don't know what 1001 movie we're going to see before we die. But again, that list is on the podcast show notes if you want to look through all the options. It's a pretty cool list. I enjoyed reading through it, but I'm just kind of weird that way.
I still haven't read through it. I gotta do that.
You probably should. Umbrellas is on there.
Yeah.
Number
I work
444.
here.
Yeah. All right. I guess you're supposed to come up with the closing line.
Yeah. Well, I have one closing line for all of y'all.
I'm just going to keep talking so there's not
So I just wanted to say, the thing is, I was kind of wondering if you wanted to.
Lost for words. Share a song.
Thank you, Spotify.
Yeah, thank you, Spotify and Apple Music, for sponsoring this episode. Please put us on your platforms. Thanks.
Good night.